We will talking about how to fast generate all the API tests you have using OpenAPI Tools and Rest-Assured. So my name is Elias. I work as a senior principal software engineer, but like it's fancy name, but mainly I'm helping out everyone that needs to be helped related to quality in general. I'm from Brazil, but I'm living in the Netherlands right now. I'm one of the Java champions and Oracle Ace for Java, and one of the Java Magazine annual editors. So you can see that I basically do everything that I do in my life using Java. Java is awesome. I also do other programming languages, but I love Java. So as you can see, and I will show you how to do those things with Java, but it doesn't exclude you to use your preferred programming language, because the OpenAPI tool support a lot of different programming languages, so you guys can do with your the one you like. Before we can start seeing how to do that, I need to tell you a story. So I will show to you first what is the backend application I have here, because we will going to test some APIs. So I will tell the API how it works, how would be the front end of that, and after that, how is the basic test with Rest-Assured, and then how we can better generate the test with Rest-Assured in a super good way with an almost bulletproof architecture. So the backend application. So I will have two APIs, simple APIs to make some calls, the simulations and the restrictions. What is the point? The simulations, it's a list of CRUD operations to record a loan simulation. And a restriction is an API that will, when consumed, will take a look, okay, for this simulation, can I allow the simulation? This, I will try to see if the person has a restriction or not. If it's not, this person can take the simulation. And the basic understanding of it, I will have the post of simulation, so creating a simulation, a loan, asking for a loan, and indirectly, this post will consume internally the get restrictions to see, okay, is this person entitled to get the loan? If no, if this person has a restriction, I will forbid it. Otherwise, I will allow it. Simple like that. And of course, when we do these things through the API, sometimes it takes some time to understand how this works and try to visualize, but this would be the front end if I would have one. I have a screen with one field that I enter my social security number and go. If I can, if I have any problem, I will see an error. Otherwise, I will be redirected to a loan field where I can fill my details and how much I need to borrow, etc. Cool. This will be the subject of testing. Now that we know the application, it's time to talk about one super important thing. If you are testing APIs, you must have access to the OpenAPI documentation, to the API documentation. Normally, it's done through the OpenAPI spec. This is the visualization of the file that we are going to use. So it's easier. This is the Swagger UI, but it's important to access the file itself. And we'll see through the presentation how we can play with this file. And this file is the main point of the whole generation for us. And we are going to do with Rest-Assured. So if you guys are not familiar with Rest-Assured, it's a DSL Java library based on with the intent to test REST-based services. It has a super intuitive syntax, and it uses actually the BDD approach, not like Cucumber or any kind of automation, but it uses the keywords given when then to better and faster understand how to create the test. And the code from Rest-Assured will look like this. A basic structure for the basic test using Rest-Assured, using Java, or Kotlin if you guys want to use, is like that. We need to import the libraries, the basic libraries from Rest-Assured. We need to, of course, annotate it with the test in Java, and we can have the test. So the first keyword, given is a precondition, right? So I'm telling here, given I have a parent, a parameter, and the parameter has the name, and the value Elias. When is my action, is my request. So when I post to register, and then it's my expected result. And inside the then, all the time when I play with API tests, and everyone plays with API tests, we need to first check the status code, and after the response body, seeing different attributes. In this case, I'm seeing, okay, do I have in the body the attribute message? And this message is Elias, hello Elias. If I have this, successful test, right? Super easy to create tests with Rest-Assured in this way. And I will show to you in the code some few tests with Rest-Assured, this basic stuff, and I will tell a little bit more. So I will just jump to my IDE. And this project that I will show you, you guys will have access right after the end of this talk. So for example, I have this simulation endpoint with get, post, put, delete, all the basic HTTP methods that I have on an API. So you can see that it's super simple. If I need to retrieve the simulation and see if the first one retrieved is the correct one, it's super easy to understand. So I'm saying when I get the simulations endpoint, then the status code is okay, which means 200, and the body in the first position of the list of objects I have has an ID, and this ID shouldn't be a null. I have a name, and the name should be a null. I have a CPF, and should be this. I have an email, should be that, and so on. This is a simple get request and the test of it. But I can have, for example, the delete part, that also easy. So given I have a path parent, because to delete something, I need to know the key, right? So it's the CPF, and this is the value. When I delete using simulations, and that CPF that matches with this, that will be translated to this, then the status code is no content, 204. And I have a lot of more tests. As a good quality engineers, I will create a lot of different tests for the happy path and the edge cases. So if we will see here, I have few ones, not a lot, but just to show you the different tests I can have. But those kind of tests, we have a problem. It's not a huge problem, but it won't scale easily. Why? If you see here, I'm using all the time the same syntax. And sometimes the endpoints, the parameters, and even the check or the structure of the response body will be the same. And I need to apply smart solutions to avoid a lot of duplications. Why? Because if I need to change in one place or a single request, I need to go through all the different tests and change a lot of the tests. And this will cause a lot of time spending on this, and maybe I can make some mistakes, and I need to run again and again and again until we can fix or change everything. So those tests with Rest-Assured using in a normal way, in a simple way, are awesome because we can easily test APIs, but they won't scale, okay? And for that, we need to create a robust framework for that. And I told you before that we noticed that the basic tests of Rest-Assured are not enough because of not only because of the syntax, but because we will have a lot of duplications. And the way we can create a good stuff, we can make tools generate things for me. And that's why we're going to use the OpenAPI specs. And I will tell you what is the OpenAPI generator, actually. So first things first, again, we need to use the OpenAPI spec. If you don't have, your team is not creating one, will be harder. If your team have it, and normally they do have, it's better. It's better to access it, and this is versioning with the software, etc. So what we're going to do, we have this application. And instead of creating things, I have this tool called OpenAPI Generator that can generate clients or code client from any API, OpenAPI spec. A client, when we say this word for generation in APIs, it's a group of code that can interact with the backend automatically. So it can be really agnostic. This OpenAPI generator can get a YAML file, which is the spec, and it can generate for you the client for Java using TypeScript, JavaScript, Go, Python, or even specific for frameworks, like for specific things for Android, for iOS, or for testing. And we are going to use one thing specifically for testing. But as a price step, before I can generate, I need to get the spec. Normally, we will have, in the Java context, again, this Wagon Maven plugin. What I need to do basically is download the spec and save in a directory in my project, of course, to be able to manipulate, to tell the tool that, okay, use this file to generate this for me. So super simple. I need to download the file, describe the location, and describe the destination. Of course, it's Java. It seems boring. It seems this horrible XML, but it's simple to understand. So what I have here, I have the execution, which is an ID because I can download multiple files. So I'm telling here download create API spec. Goals for Java when you use Maven is important because the goal here is when I download, the phase that I will download is generate source. It's one of the first phase from Maven to generate the code and continue in the flow. And I need to path to the file. It can be an URL, an encoded one, through the file. It can be anywhere that I can say here and state here and get it. Okay, we are going to use an URL, and I need to tell where it will be located. I will download and place somewhere. You're not going to add in your download folder or anything like this. You are going to add in your project folder. Normally we have the target folder, which is a temporary one with all the Java binaries there. It's one of the best places. Cool. First thing, download it. And I have the full template here. And showing this to you, and normally it appears for Java projects in a file called pom.xml. And this pom.xml, I have a lot of things, but inside the build stack of Maven, I have added the Wagon Maven plugin, and I have exactly the same thing I was showing: the goals, the execution ID, the goal, the generate source, and the configuration. And you can see that the configuration is doing the dir to save, but where is the file? So what I'm doing, I'm going to the GitHub repo of this API. I'm going to the resource folder and I'm getting the file. But you guys might have different ways to do it, okay? This is the first thing. Second thing, we need to now generate all those codes instead of write the basic test with Rest-Assured. For that, we are going to use this OpenAPI generator, which is a Maven plugin. There's a Gradle plugin. There's a lot of plugins. This one is using Java Maven. In general, we are going to tell the plugin which file it should be taken to generate, the main packages to generate, because we have different things, API models and extra files. We need to tell this generator to use Rest-Assured as the library. So this generator will generate specific things for Rest-Assured. And we need to tell the serialization library, because in Rest-Assured, if you guys are new with Rest-Assured or are learning Rest-Assured, Rest-Assured has a super cool feature that is it can serialize and deserialize objects based on the request and response. So instead of me telling through the code, okay, this field is this on this class, that one is that on that class, Rest-Assured does it automatically. So it's a super cool feature, but I need to tell which library I need to use because there's a lot of different libraries for that. How we can do this generation? Again, super ugly XML in the POM file of Maven, but it's easy to understand. All the time, an ID for that, for the execution, for this specific OpenAPI generator. I will tell the goal is to generate, in which phase, when I compile my sources, generating my sources, where is the OpenAPI spec that I need on this directory, and some formalities for the OpenAPI generator. It will generate code. If I want to, I can define the invoker package, because the basic package to start application, start the client, the API package, where it will replace the API code, the models object, and I will do this match to show what is the model object in this way. The generators, I will generate using Java programming language. I could write here Go, TypeScript, and anything that is supported. If I want to generate the API tests as well, never, because it's a template, it's super outdated. And model test, not as well, because we normally don't test models, we test the whole flow in the API. And a configuration option that, okay, the code specifically for this will be for Rest-Assured, and the library to serialize and deserialize will be Jackson. I'm showing you a lot of boring stuff for now, which is the basic price steps, preconditions to be able to generate the code instead of me writing that a lot of code, okay? And when needs to talk about all this, we have all these whole features from Rest-Assured, and I was telling you that not scale, because there's no way to increase the easily the coverage if I still duplicating code in this sense with the same steps, with a lot of things, but with data. We have a lot of different approaches to that and techniques, but only the code that we saw using Rest-Assured, it's not good enough. Not only the generation is good enough. So instead of only generate it, we need a better architecture as well, applying some abstractions and design patterns. And this is the whole thing. But first, I will show to you how it looks like the generated code. So what I will do, I have everything here, even for the OpenAPI generator. I have exactly the same thing I was showing to you. So I have everything, the config options to Rest-Assured, all the API models, everything. But how does this work? I will compile the project, because I'm telling to Maven clean compile. Every time that I need to that I want to compile the project or any other phase after this, the whole client will be generated again. So I will explain to you. Maven will go crazy here, putting a lot of information message. But if we see this information message, it's writing some classes, writing some files for me. And it runs a bit more and success. What I will have, what we did actually, what this have done, we downloaded the spec, and now we generated the client. And everything will be in the target folder in the left side, generated sources, OpenAPI, and now I have here a full project. But instead of use this project, I can take a look on the source main, Java, and I can see here API, and I have restrictions API and simulations API. So I have the code to play with the API here inside. I have the models. What are the models? If you guys are a little bit familiar with the OpenAPI spec or this visual representation of Swagger UI, for example, when I get a simulation, here I can see that the response, let me increase a little bit more, will be status code 200, and this will return an entity or a response body, which will have CPF, email, name, installments, students, and amount. And I have a schema for that. And this schema is my model. And this schema, actually, if I go down there in my spec, I can see here simulation, the same schema with the examples for each attribute with the type of the attribute, even the maximum, minimum, etc. So I have everything. And this will be translated as a model or as a class. Okay. Continue here. Before I can show more a little bit the code, we need to also create a architecture for that. So the proposed architecture that is a good one, I need to create two abstractions, a client and a service. Why do I need a client and a service? I could do in only one. Because in a client, I will connect my code with the auto-generated one, and the service, I can, for example, the auto-generated one has the endpoint. I can make through a Java code the same thing. I can get the code. I can say, okay, do a get, do a post, do a delete. The API abstraction will do it. But sometimes when we are testing APIs, we need to do a group of calls to be able to do one specific thing for the test. So that's why normally we create a service abstraction, for example, to make a payment. Sometimes to make a payment in some context, it's 3, 4, 5 different calls to the API. Instead of doing 4 different calls, I can abstract that 4 different calls in a service and create a method to do a payment. I'm sending the necessary parameters, and all those different calls will be made. And of course, I will use only the service abstraction in the test. And the service abstraction, we use the client. It seems confusing, but I will show to you how to do it. Okay. And of course, the first thing we need is a builder class to be able to build everything from that client. So another thing to comments to you, in the basic test using Rest-Assured, if you guys see here, I have all the time the endpoints stated for get, the post, delete, any HTTP method. And how I can do it, how Rest-Assured knows that I'm hitting the correct endpoint. Normally, I need a base class. It's called here base API configuration. So I have the basic endpoints, base URI, base path, and the port. And Rest-Assured will do the concatenation about everything together. So it will be like, when I need to run a test, would be like HTTP, localhost, exactly like that. Okay, for the simulations. Of course, the port is here. Rest-Assured will do this concatenation for me. Cool. And that's why Rest-Assured can test all those things. How we can do this with the new approach for architecture. First, if I look at the auto-generated code, I can see like in the simulations that this OpenAPI generator generated a Java class with this operation. And it's stating for me here, the method for this deleting using delete oper is delete. And the URI for that is API version 1 simulation and the parameter. I just need to take care about the base endpoint, and everything it's already in the OpenAPI spec generated. So I don't need to play anymore with all those endpoints and create constants to pointing out. Cool. This simulation API will have all the methods for the supported methods from the OpenAPI: get, post, delete, put, etc. But in order to play with it, like I did in the normal test, I need to do more or less the same thing, but for using Rest-Assured, using together with the OpenAPI tools, I need to create this nasty code where I'm calling here REST API client builder. So I need to have a builder, getting something specifically from Java here, a supplier. I need to create a request specification based on a supplier. And I need to, the main thing here is that I'm setting the base URI, the port, and I build it. And all the other stuffs that code will take care for you. The full matching of the path for the API and etc. will be done by the auto-generated code. This is only the piece of code we need to create and start. And for this architecture, the first thing I need to build the client API. And the client API, I need to build the specific client that was generated. For example, in the restrictions one, inside the restrictions, I have this public stack restrictions. I have the restrictions that supplier. That supplier is the thing that I have as a precondition there, this previous code that I will be able to pass a supplier here. It's a super Java specific, but it's the same way all the time. And as soon as I pass the supplier, I can start using this API. So I can use the one using get, which is the call for the get endpoint, for example. It seems super complicated, but I'll show you how to do it now in 1 second. And when I need to do the get, I can see that one using get opera has everything, has the HTTP method, has the full URI for that, API version 1 restrictions, and have even the method adding in the end the parameter here to the request. And I don't need to do this anymore in the code like I was doing this given parent, then get, etc. It's perfect. And how I can do it? Normally, let's go there. API. So I have the same class that supplier that I need to create, and here is hard coded, but normally we would create a property file and get this from the properties or from the environment variables to set different environments, etc. But I must have this REST API client builder, a class, and I need to start generating the client. And for the restrictions, what needs to do? Super simple. I'm creating a new instance of this restriction API. This restriction API is the auto-generated one. It has a lot of code. All this code here, I would create using basic Rest-Assured. But as I'm using the OpenAPI generator, it's generating everything for me. So it's saving a lot of time from us. And I'm telling, okay, my supplier, that ugly code that I need, build the restriction API for me, which is called internally restrictions, that needs to have that supplier. Cool. The next thing, I can start using it. So I can create methods like public response. It's a generic response. So a query CPF with restriction, and I can just create some code here, string CPF, not restriction because I don't want it, and done. What I'm doing here, the restriction API will show all the possible methods that I can use. In this way, I have a v1 and v2. Let's say query CPF v2, and I just change v2 here. Perfect. Okay. If I would have the simulations part, will be the same, but I will show as soon as we are about to finish this. This is the basic thing, the client. So the client, I can use all the methods from the auto-generated client. Okay. This is the explanation that I just did. And I need to have the service. So the service itself is the abstraction that will be used in the test. So if you see here, I'm now using that API client that I was before, and here, see, I'm using specific returning objects because I know one thing. The query CPF It's all the time the same. But the difference is the data. So the data can be, the CPF can be with restrictions or without restriction. So I'm creating two methods here. If I have one without restriction, the status code will be not found, there's no restriction. I'm returning false, there's no restriction, and I can easily validate this. If I have something with restriction and look at my API for simulation, and the simulation says here, if I have a restriction, it will return the full, this is the simulation, sorry, restriction. Here, it will return the 200, and the response body will have a message, and this message will have this pattern, and the model, it's called message v1. That's why I have this message v1. And this message v1 is a class auto-generated by OpenAPI generator to be used, which has the message here. So instead of me creating this class as well to match my response using Rest-Assured, it's already here. It's already auto-generated. So I'm just now defining the architecture of my tests. So if I need to create a test using this CPF without a restriction, I can use this, and I know that will return a Boolean false. But if I need with a restriction, I just created another method, query with a restriction. I send the data that has a restriction, and the response body will be this message we want. That will be easily the message there inside with that content. Okay, this I will use in the test, and look right now how easy is the test looks like. So the normal test without it, for those two, with and without restriction, will look like this. They are almost the same structure. Given I have a parameter, when I do the get, then the difference is here is not found. The other one, the difference here is that I have the message, but the beginning is the same, and I'm starting a lot of code duplications, okay? How it looks like with the normal architecture, because I don't need to create that code, it's auto-generated by me from the OpenAPI generator to me. So I need to go here and look at this. I'm creating one with restriction. So I'm just saying that this social security number, the CPF, and I'm calling restriction API service, which is that service abstraction. Oops, I just closed it. Let's open it again. And query CPF with a restriction. And I know that this data will have a restriction. Then magically, Rest-Assured and the auto-generated code will transform that response and this message version 1. And what I can do, assert that the message.getMessage contains this CPF. If I want to do without a restriction, I know that I have here restriction API service. If I press dot, I can see I have query CPF and query without a restriction. I will, with restriction, sorry. I'm doing without a restriction, sending one that has no restriction, and then I can assert that is restricted, is false, and this is returning this query CPF. What is the magic of it? If I would like to do like this, that's auto-generated, that's beautifully in the normal Rest-Assured, in this test, I need to create a class. For example, I would create a class message. I would just call message here, and a private message, exactly like that. More everything that I want. In the Rest-Assured, and then instead of this, I would do extract body as message, and this will look like this. And after that, I can use assert that Here, the syntax will be different, but I said that message.getMessage contains that thing. There's a little bit more code that I need to create, even a new class. But with the OpenAPI generator doing the things for me, I don't need to generate anything anymore. So it's really easier. And let's see one thing. I'm showing you this, but let's see if this works. I will just run this class. Enable unblock. And illegal number of parameters. Oh, this is I need the new one, not this one, because that one is meant to fail. Success. The 2 tests that I have run without any issue. Using a lot of less code, you see my test look really readable as well. Okay, so back to the talk. I will just go through the slides because I already showed it to you, so this is for later to you. And I showed the tests, the difference. And I show you the basic API part of it, okay? What if I would create this from scratch? And it's good to understand. I will just will do one with you here, just to make everything together so we can understand a little bit more. I have the client for restriction, but let's say I need the simulation as well. So simulation API, how I'm calling that? API client, okay. And as I have here in the restrictions, this REST API builder, I will do the same thing for the simulation. Private simulation API. Simulation API is a new restriction REST API builder dot build and the simulation class, but the simulation will be like simulations like this. Simulations API actually, right? So this is the first point in simulation is why simulations API. Simulation simulations, cool. And now what I can do, I have, for example, the get. I need to get a simulation. Public response get simulation. And I use simulation API, get simulation. I know that get simulation needs an ID, and this is the ID, and execute function dot identity. That is a pattern that I needs to use. But why this ID, the get simulation? There is nothing to get. So get, let's say, one simulation. And this get, it's by CPF, sorry. Get simulation on by CPF. And this requires CPF. It's here. And it required the object CPF. That's why it's fading here, but I can see just cast, refactor, okay. And I can use the same thing, response, post, or create simulation. Simulation. When I use the auto-generated client, which is the simulations API, let me increase a little bit. Dot. Okay. Can you see here that I have get, delete, post, update, another get. I have all the required HTTP methods. So it's perfect. I have everything that I need. And for example, to create a post, I have here the body, which is a simulation. So for example, simulation that I need, simulation, oops, simulation, and here I need the simulation. And it's failing because it's a different model, but it's okay. So everything that I need to create is return. I just create this abstraction, turn, and I can start doing everything that I want. The post, simulation, the get, everything. You don't need to create more that simple rest-assured code to develop your test and to have like this full overview of, okay, the test is more readable because the test is more readable with this architecture, right? And you can create any more different test case in a super fast way and be super fast paced on it. Cool. Let me see if you guys have some questions in the chat, because you guys can ask for anything all at any time in questions answer or in the chat. And this is what I would like to show to you. I know that seems a little bit more complicated because I was focused on a super technical way, but I'm sure if you guys later on take a look again the slides in a more easy way, read again and see the project, you guys will follow a little bit more. And to understand this fully, you guys need to practice in this way. So to practice, if you guys scan this QR code, you guys will jump into my public profile repo on GitHub. You guys can see the slides of this talk and the project of this talk. If you guys follow me on the GitHub, LinkedIn, or Twitter, I will post there the slides and the project as well. If you guys need to ask me any questions later, you guys can also approach me on all the social networks. Cool. I would like to thank you all to be here with me, hearing about a little bit more about testing, about these technical aspects of testing, how to do it with Rest-Assured and OpenAPI spec.
Well, thank you, Elias. If more questions come in, either throughout the day or later, we'll certainly pass them on to you. And
Perfect.
Okay, so thank you for an incredible first session. I think we all learned a lot about OpenAPI tools and how to get things done quickly.